Mafia boss feared by all couldn't stand her stare. He melted with her touch. Chad Melvin stood in the middle of his casino floor, frozen. His charcoal suit was perfectly pressed, his expression controlled as always, but his hands were shaking. For 17 years, he had ruled Las Vegas without fear. Men twice his size stepped aside when he walked past. Rival bosses refused to meet his eyes. Everyone called him the untouchable because nothing and no one could break through his walls. But right now, across the Eclipse bar, a woman in a simple navy dress was looking directly at him, and he could not move. She sat alone with a notebook in her lap, sketching something he could not see. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders in soft waves. She had no idea who he was. She did not know his name or his reputation. She was just drawing, lost in her own world. When her warm brown eyes lifted and met his, Chad felt something crack inside his chest. This stranger had just done what no enemy ever could. She made him feel vulnerable. She made him feel human. And he had no idea whether to walk toward her or run away. What would you do if you suddenly had power over the most powerful person in the room? Drop your answer in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If you love powerful romance stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because tomorrow we're dropping another story you won't want to miss. Your likes, shares, and support help us bring you more incredible love stories. Now, let's go back to where it all began. To understand why Chad Melvin froze when Michelle looked at him, you need to know the story of how he became the untouchable. Chad grew up in Bridgeport, a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. His father ran an empire that most people never saw. On paper, they owned restaurants and nightclubs. In reality, they controlled gambling operations, money laundering, and a network of connections that stretched from Chicago to Las Vegas. Chad's mother worked as a nurse and pretended not to know what her husband really did. She kept their home clean and warm, made sure Chad did his homework, and prayed every night that her son would choose a different path. But when you are born into that world, the choice is not always yours to make. Chad was 17 when his father was killed. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon outside a restaurant in the Loop. His father had been meeting with a business partner who turned out to be working with a rival organization. 2 gunshots, and everything changed. Chad came home from school to find his mother sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing her nurse's uniform, crying in a way that made no sound. The funeral was held on a gray November day. Chad stood beside his mother at the cemetery, watching them lower his father into the ground. Men in expensive suits came to pay their respects. They shook Chad's hand and told him his father was a good man. They told him the business would be waiting when he was ready. Chad was still a kid, but he understood what they meant. His father's empire needed someone to run it, and he was the only heir. That day, standing in the cold wind with dirt on his father's casket, Chad made himself a promise. His father had died because he loved too much. He had been distracted, made careless by worry about Chad's mother, about keeping his family safe. Love had made him vulnerable, and vulnerability had gotten him killed. Chad decided right there that he would never let anyone get close enough to hurt him. He would take over his father's empire, but he would do it alone. No weakness, no attachments, no love. He kept that promise for 17 years. By the time he was 34, Chad had transformed his father's Chicago operations and expanded into Las Vegas. He moved to Nevada and built the Meridian, a casino that became his crown jewel. Unlike his father, who ruled through fear and violence, Chad was smarter. He was ruthless when necessary, but he also understood that respect lasted longer than terror. He paid his employees well. He kept his word in business deals. He donated to children's hospitals and made sure his operations stayed away from schools and family neighborhoods. People respected him. People feared him. But no one really knew him. His security team followed him everywhere, always 3 steps behind. His lawyers handled the complicated work of keeping everything just legal enough to avoid federal attention. His accountants made sure money flowed through legitimate businesses. Chad attended charity galas in $1,000 suits. He shook hands with politicians and made donations to their campaigns. He smiled for photos and played the role of successful businessman. But at night, when he returned to his penthouse 50 floors above the Las Vegas Strip, he was alone. Always alone. He told himself this was what he wanted. This was what kept him safe. His typical day started at 6 in the morning with coffee on his balcony, looking out over the city. He worked out in his private gym for an hour, pushing his body until his muscles burned. He showered, dressed in one of his perfectly tailored suits, and went down to his office by 8. Meetings filled his mornings. Contractors updating him on construction projects. Managers reporting on casino operations. Lawyers discussing new business acquisitions. Chad listened to everything, asked sharp questions, made quick decisions. In the afternoons, he walked the casino floor. This was his favorite part of the day, though he would never admit it. He liked watching people. The couples celebrating an anniversary at the blackjack table. The businessman trying to impress clients at the high-limit slots. The group of friends laughing over cocktails. They came to his casino seeking excitement, escape, a chance at winning big. Chad had built the Meridian to give them something better than the other casinos on the Strip. Most casino owners did not care about architecture or design. They wanted flashing lights and loud music and enough distractions to keep people gambling. But Chad was different. He had always loved buildings, the way spaces could make people feel certain emotions. As a teenager, before his father died, he had dreamed of becoming an architect. He spent hours sketching buildings in notebooks, designing homes and museums and towers that existed only in his imagination. When his father was killed, those dreams died too. But when Chad decided to build the Meridian, he poured all that lost passion into the design. He hired the best architects and interior designers, but he controlled every decision. The ceilings were high, giving the space an open feeling instead of the claustrophobic pressure of most casinos. The lighting was warm instead of harsh. Real art hung on the walls, not cheap reproductions. The Eclipse Bar was his personal favorite, a circular space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of the entire casino floor. People noticed the difference. The Meridian attracted a different crowd. Wealthier, more sophisticated. People who appreciated quality. The casino made money, but more than that, it was beautiful. It was the one place where Chad felt like he had created something meaningful instead of just inheriting his father's world. But even that satisfaction was hollow. Because at the end of every day, Chad went back to his empty penthouse. He ate dinner alone. He reviewed reports and made calls to his various businesses. Sometimes he stood at his window and looked down at the city lights, at all the people living their lives, and he felt nothing. Not happy, not sad, just empty. His mother called him once a week from Chicago. She had refused to move to Las Vegas, preferring to stay in the modest house where she had raised Chad. During their calls, she always asked the same questions. Was he eating properly? Was he getting enough sleep? Had he met anyone special? Chad answered patiently. Yes, he was fine. No, there was no one special. There would never be anyone special. That was the point. After 17 years of living this way, Chad had convinced himself that he was content. He told himself that power and success were enough. He told himself that being alone was better than being vulnerable. He looked at married couples and saw weakness. He looked at people in love and saw future pain. He believed this completely. Until the night Michelle Jones walked into his casino and looked at him with eyes that saw everything he had spent 17 years hiding. In that single moment, all his careful control meant nothing. His walls, built so high and strong, cracked down the middle. And for the first time since he was 17 years old, standing at his father's funeral, Chad Melvin felt something real. He felt terrified. He felt alive. And he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Michelle Jones woke up every morning at 6:30 to the sound of rain on her apartment windows. Portland was like that, especially in the fall and winter. Soft, steady rain that made the city feel gentle and quiet. She would make coffee in her small kitchen, sit at the table by the window, and watch the neighborhood come alive. The couple next door walking their dog. The jogger who passed by at exactly 7:15 every morning. The school bus stopping at the corner. By 7:45, Michelle was in her car, driving to Riverside Elementary School on the east side of Portland. She taught second grade, 23 students who were 7 and 8 years old. Their names were written on colorful labels above their coat hooks. Their artwork covered every wall of her classroom. Michelle had been teaching for 6 years, and she loved it in a way that surprised her. She had not planned to become a teacher. Growing up in a small town outside Eugene, Oregon, Michelle had dreamed of being an artist. Her parents supported her, but they also worried. Her father worked as a logger, her mother as a librarian. They understood the value of steady work and reliable income. When Michelle got accepted to art school in San Francisco, they sat her down for a serious conversation. They could not afford to help with tuition. If she wanted to go, she would need loans. Lots of loans. And art was not a guaranteed career. Michelle had stayed up all night thinking about it. She loved painting and drawing, but she also loved children. She loved teaching her younger cousins how to make things, how to see the world differently. So she made a compromise with herself. She would study education instead of art. She would become a teacher, have a stable job, and make art in her free time. That had been 12 years ago. The art in her free time had slowly become less frequent. Now she mostly sketched in her notebook during quiet moments. Little drawings of her students, the view from her apartment, flowers at the farmer's market. Nothing serious. Nothing that would ever hang in a gallery. But she was good at teaching. Her students loved her. Parents requested her class. The principal praised her creativity in the classroom. Michelle brought art into everything she taught. Math problems about mixing paint colors. Science lessons where students drew the life cycle of butterflies. History projects where they made journals from the perspective of pioneers traveling west. She was content. Maybe not fulfilled in the way her younger self had imagined, but content. She had good friends, a cozy apartment, a job that mattered. She dated occasionally, but nothing serious. 3 years ago, she had ended a relationship with a man she thought she might marry. He wanted her to be more practical, less dreamy. He complained that she spent too much time on her students and not enough time on their future together. When she realized his vision of their future had no room for the parts of herself she valued most, she ended it. Since then, Michelle had focused on herself, her classroom, her small circle of friends. She was 29 years old, and she was okay with being single. She would rather be alone than be with someone who made her feel like she needed to be different. Which is why she was not excited when her best friend Kendra announced her bachelorette party would be in Las Vegas. Michelle had never wanted to go to Las Vegas. The city represented everything she found overwhelming. Noise, crowds, artificial lights, people gambling away money they probably could not afford to lose. She liked quiet mornings and forest hikes and coffee shops with local art on the walls. Las Vegas was the opposite of everything she valued. But Kendra was getting married, and Michelle was her maid of honor. So she bought a plane ticket, packed a small suitcase, and flew to Nevada on a Friday afternoon in July. The moment she stepped out of the airport into the desert heat, Michelle knew this was a mistake. The temperature was over 100 degrees. The air felt like it was burning her lungs. Their hotel was on the Strip, surrounded by massive casino resorts that looked like fantasy versions of Paris and New York and ancient Rome. Everything was too big, too loud, too much. Kendra and the other bridesmaids were thrilled. They wanted to see shows, gamble, dance at nightclubs, drink fancy cocktails. Michelle tried to keep up. She really did. She put on the dress they bought for her, went to dinner at a celebrity chef restaurant, smiled for photos in front of fountains. But by Saturday evening, she was exhausted. Her feet hurt from walking in heels. Her head ached from the noise. She needed a break from the constant stimulation. When the group decided to hit another nightclub, Michelle excused herself. She claimed a headache, which was not entirely a lie. Kendra was tipsy and happy enough not to argue. Michelle promised to meet them for brunch the next morning. Back at the hotel, Michelle changed out of her uncomfortable dress and into something simple. A navy blue dress she had packed for the flight home. Comfortable sandals. She pulled her hair back, looked at herself in the mirror, and felt like herself again. She did not want to stay in the hotel room. It was small and the walls were thin, and she could hear people in the hallway heading out for their own Saturday night adventures. She needed space to breathe, to think, to remember who she was underneath the chaos of this weekend. Michelle grabbed her crossbody bag with her sketchbook and pencils inside. She took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the warm night air. The Strip was packed with tourists and street performers and people handing out flyers for shows. She walked away from the crowds, down a side street, looking for somewhere quiet. That is when she saw the Meridian. It stood slightly apart from the other casinos, elegant in a way that felt different. The architecture was modern but warm. Through the tall windows, she could see that the lighting inside was softer than the harsh brightness of other casinos. On impulse, Michelle walked in. The difference was immediate. The Meridian was still a casino, still had slot machines and card tables and all the usual things. But it felt calmer, more sophisticated. The carpet was deep blue with silver patterns. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Real paintings hung on the walls between the gaming areas. Michelle walked through the main floor, observing the people around her. A couple in their 60s playing blackjack, holding hands between rounds. A young man at a slot machine, his leg bouncing nervously. A woman in a red dress laughing with the bartender. Everyone here was hoping for something. A big win, a memorable night, a story to tell when they got home. She found the Eclipse bar at the far end of the casino floor. It was circular, with a view of everything but somehow feeling separate from it all. Michelle slid onto a stool at the far end, away from the few other people scattered around the bar. She ordered a glass of wine from the friendly bartender and pulled out her sketchbook. This was better. This was what she needed. Michelle began to sketch the architecture, the way the curves of the bar echoed the curves of the chandeliers overhead. The flow of people moving through the space. The geometric patterns in the carpet. She lost herself in the drawing, her hand moving across the page, her breathing finally slowing down. She did not notice the man watching her from across the casino floor. She had no idea that in a few moments, her entire life was about to change. She was just drawing, just being herself, just trying to find a moment of peace in a city that never stopped moving. And that is exactly why Chad Melvin could not look away. Chad stood in the shadows near the high-limit gaming area, watching the woman at the Eclipse bar. His security team waited at a respectful distance, confused by his stillness. Chad never stopped moving during his floor walks. He checked on operations, spoke with managers, kept everything running smoothly. But for the past 10 minutes, he had been standing in one spot, staring at a woman who was completely absorbed in her sketchbook. He should walk away. He had rules about this. Never get personal with guests. Never let anyone distract him from business. Never open the door to connection. These rules had protected him for 17 years. They had kept him focused, kept him safe, kept him in control. But something about her pulled at him. Maybe it was the way she sat so peacefully in the middle of his casino, untouched by the energy around her. Maybe it was the fact that she was alone and seemed perfectly content with that. Maybe it was simply that she was beautiful in an understated way that had nothing to do with trying to be noticed. Before Chad could talk himself out of it, he was walking toward her. His heart was beating faster than it should. His palms felt damp. These were sensations he had not experienced in years, and he did not like them. But he kept walking until he reached the bar, until he was standing close enough to see what she was drawing. Architecture. She was sketching the design of his casino. "You're the first person I've ever seen sketching in my casino," Chad said, sliding onto the stool beside her. Michelle looked up from her notebook. Her eyes were warm brown, direct and open. She did not look impressed or intimidated. She just looked at him like he was another person interrupting her work. "Is that against the rules?" she asked, closing her sketchbook protectively. "I'm not counting cards, I promise. Just drawing the architecture." "No rules against it," Chad replied. He signaled the bartender for a scotch he did not really want. "I'm just curious. Most people come to Vegas to forget themselves. You seem to be remembering something." Michelle tilted her head, studying him. "That's surprisingly insightful for a pickup line." "Not a pickup line," Chad said, and he realized it was true. "Just an observation." There was a pause. Michelle seemed to be deciding whether to engage with him or politely end the conversation. Chad found himself hoping she would stay. That hope alone should have sent him running. "I teach second grade," Michelle said finally, some warmth entering her voice. "I'm always observing. It's how you figure out which kid is struggling, who needs extra help, who's just having a bad day. You learn to see people." "And what do you see when you look at me?" The question came out before Chad could stop it. It was vulnerable, genuine, completely unlike him. He waited for her answer, his chest tight. Michelle paused, really looking at him now. Not at his expensive suit or his commanding presence, but deeper. "Someone who's forgotten how to relax," she said slowly. "Someone carrying weight that doesn't show." Chad felt like she had reached into his chest and touched something he thought was unreachable. No one had ever seen through him like that. Not in one glance. Not ever. "What are you drinking?" he asked, needing to change the subject before he revealed too much. "Red wine. Nothing fancy." Michelle smiled slightly. "I'm not really a Vegas person. I'm here for a friend's bachelorette party, but I needed a break from all the noise." "So you came to a casino?" "This one feels different," Michelle said, gesturing around them. "Quieter somehow. More human." "That was intentional," Chad admitted. "I designed it that way." Michelle's eyes widened. "You designed this? The whole building?" "Well, I worked with architects. But yes, the concept was mine. I wanted something that respected people instead of just taking their money." For the next 3 hours, they talked. Chad forgot about his empire, his responsibilities, the dozen calls buzzing in his pocket that he ignored. Michelle forgot about her friends, her planned early night, her usual careful boundaries with strangers. They talked about her students and the funny things 7-year-olds said. How one of her students insisted that George Washington invented peanut butter, and no amount of historical evidence could convince him otherwise. Chad found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. Michelle asked about the design of the meridian, and Chad explained his vision. How he wanted the space to feel open instead of trapped. How he chose art that told stories instead of just filling wall space. How the Eclipse Bar was designed so people could watch the casino floor but feel separate from it, like they were observing life instead of drowning in it. "That's exactly how I feel right now," Michelle said softly. "Like I'm in Vegas but not a Vegas." They discovered they both loved old buildings. Michelle talked about the historic homes in Portland, the craftsman architecture that made the city feel rooted in something real. Chad talked about the Chicago buildings from his childhood, the solid brick structures that had survived decades. The conversation drifted to bigger questions. What made a life meaningful? Michelle believed it was connection, impact on others, especially children. She talked about a student she had last year who came from a difficult home. The boy had been angry, disruptive, failing. Michelle spent extra time with him, discovering he loved drawing. She gave him sketchbooks and encouraged his art. By the end of the year, he was thriving. "That's why I teach," she said. "Those moments when you see a child discover something in themselves they didn't know was there." Chad found himself sharing things he never talked about. His original dream of becoming an architect. How his father's death had changed everything. He did not explain exactly what his father's business was, but he hinted at complexity, at inheritance, at obligation. "I'm trying to transform what I was given into something better," he said carefully. "It's not easy. Sometimes I wonder if it's even possible." "Anything's possible if you want it badly enough," Michelle replied. "But you have to actually want it, not just want it." The distinction hit Chad hard. Did he want to change his life, or did he just want to change it? Before tonight, he would have said he was content. But sitting here with Michelle, talking about real things, feeling genuinely interested in another person for the first time in years, he realized how empty his life had become. Why teaching instead of art? Chad asked, noticing how her fingers had ink stains from her sketching. "You're clearly talented." Michelle looked down at her hands. "Practical choice. Stable income. Art is wonderful, but second-grade teachers actually help people." She paused. "That's what I tell myself. Anyway, some days I wonder if I took the safe road instead of the right one." "I think helping children discover themselves is art," Chad said. "Maybe the most important kind." Michelle met his eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. Two people who had made choices that protected them but also limited them. Two people who were maybe, possibly, tired of being safe. Chad checked his watch and was shocked to see it was past midnight. 3 hours had disappeared. His security team was probably having a panic attack somewhere nearby, wondering why he had been sitting at the bar for so long. "I should let you go," Michelle said, though she did not sound like she wanted to. "Can I see you tomorrow?" The words came out urgent, almost desperate. Chad Melvin did not do desperate. But here he was, asking a woman he just met to give him more of her time, breaking every rule he had lived by. Michelle hesitated. "I'm leaving Sunday morning. I have a flight back to Portland." "Then tomorrow," Chad pressed. "Just for coffee. Or a walk. Something." She studied him for a long moment. Chad felt completely exposed, like she was reading every thought in his head. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like relief. "The botanical gardens at the Bellagio," Michelle said finally. 10 in the morning. "I'll be there." Michelle stood when it was time to leave. Chad stood too, and they faced each other beside the bar. The casino continued its endless motion around them, But in that moment, they existed in their own small bubble of stillness. "Thank you for the conversation," Michelle said. "I didn't expect to meet someone interesting tonight." "Neither did I," Chad replied. His hand moved almost unconsciously, reaching out to touch her arm briefly. The contact lasted only a second, but it sent electricity through both of them. "I meant what I said. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Michelle nodded, picking up her bag. "Bellagio Gardens. I'll be there." She walked away, and Chad watched her go. He noticed the graceful way she moved, unhurried even in a city that never stopped rushing. He noticed how she smiled at the elderly couple she passed, how she held the door for someone on her way out. Small gestures that revealed character. When she disappeared through the casino entrance, Chad felt her absence like a physical thing. The noise of the casino rushed back in. The lights seemed harsher. His security chief approached cautiously, clearly concerned about the unprecedented 3-hour break in routine. "Everything okay, boss?" he asked. Chad nodded, still staring at the door where Michelle had exited. "Everything's fine." But everything was not fine. As Chad walked back through his casino, checking in with managers and reviewing the night's numbers, his mind was somewhere else entirely. He kept replaying their conversation. The way Michelle had looked at him when she said he was carrying weight that didn't show. The sound of her laugh when he told her about a construction disaster during the Meridian's opening week. The ink stains on her fingers. The warmth in her eyes. This was dangerous. Chad knew it with absolute certainty. In 3 hours, this woman had made him feel more than he had felt in 17 years. She had made him want things he had convinced himself he did not need. Connection. Understanding. Someone to talk to about more than business and strategy. Someone who saw him as more than the untouchable. He should cancel tomorrow. He should send a polite message saying something came up. He should protect himself the way he always had, by keeping distance, by staying alone. But even as Chad thought these things, he knew he would not do them. He was going to show up at the Bellagio Gardens tomorrow morning. He was going to see Michelle again. He was going to keep breaking his own rules because for the first time since his father's funeral, something mattered more than safety. That realization terrified him. Back in his penthouse, Chad stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Las Vegas Strip. The city glittered below, millions of lights promising fortune and excitement. He had built his empire in this city. He had everything most men dreamed of. Money, power, respect, fear. He controlled more than most people would ever know. But tonight, standing alone in his empty penthouse, Chad felt the hollowness of it all. What was the point of an empire if you had no one to share it with? What was the point of being untouchable if it meant never being touched? His phone buzzed with messages from his various operations. Problems that needed solving. Decisions that needed making. Chad ignored them all. He kept thinking about Michelle's question. "What do you see when you look at me?" No one had ever asked him that. No one had ever cared what he saw, only what he could do for them. Chad did not sleep that night. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to run from whatever this was. Part of him wanted to drive to Michelle's hotel right now and keep talking until the sun came up. He had never felt so out of control, and control was everything to him. But maybe that was the point. Maybe control was just another word for prison. Across the city, Michelle was not sleeping either. She sat on the edge of her hotel bed, her sketchbook open in her lap, trying to draw but unable to focus. Her roommate for the weekend, one of Kendra's bridesmaids, was snoring softly in the other bed. The clock on the nightstand read 2 in the morning. Michelle kept replaying the evening. She had gone to the casino seeking quiet, expecting nothing more than an hour of sketching before returning to the hotel. Instead, she had spent 3 hours talking to a stranger who somehow did not feel like a stranger at all. Chad. She did not even know his last name. Did not know what he really did beyond owning a casino. Did not know anything concrete about his life. But she felt like she knew him in ways that mattered more than facts. She knew he was lonely. She knew he was carrying burdens he had never put down. She knew that beneath his controlled exterior was someone who wanted connection but was afraid to reach for it. Michelle recognized that fear because she felt it too. After her last relationship ended, she had promised herself she would be careful. She would not fall for someone just because they seemed interesting or different. She would protect her heart. She would focus on her work, her students, her life in Portland. But something about Chad had gotten past all her defenses. Maybe it was the vulnerability she saw in his eyes when he asked what she saw in him. Maybe it was the way he really listened when she talked about teaching, not just waiting for his turn to speak. Maybe it was the intelligence in his questions, the thoughtfulness in his answers. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was chemistry, the kind of connection that happened rarely, if ever, in a lifetime. Michelle thought about canceling tomorrow. She could text Kendra, say she was not feeling well, spend the day in the hotel room. She could protect herself from whatever this was before it became something real. But even as she thought it, Michelle knew she would not do it. She was going to meet Chad at the Bellagio Gardens. She was going to see where this went. Because life was too short to always choose safety over possibility. Because her students taught her every day that the best things came from taking risks, from trying even when you might fail. She set her sketchbook aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was beating faster than it should. Her mind was racing with questions. What was she doing? This was crazy. She lived in Portland. He lived in Vegas. They had just met. Nothing about this made sense. But sense was overrated. Michelle had spent her whole life making sensible choices. Choosing teaching over art. Choosing stability over dreams. Choosing safety over adventure. Maybe it was time to choose differently. She closed her eyes, and the last thing she saw before sleep finally came was Chad's face. The way he had looked at her when she said he was carrying weight that did not show. Like she had spoken a truth he needed to hear. Like she had seen him in a way no one else ever had. In their separate rooms, miles apart in a city that never slept, Chad and Michelle both lay awake thinking about the same thing. Thinking about tomorrow. Thinking about each other. Thinking about the dangerous, impossible, completely illogical thing that was beginning between them. Neither of them understood it. Neither of them could explain it. But both of them knew, with certainty that felt like fate, that their lives had just changed in ways they could not predict or control. And for two people who had spent years protecting themselves, choosing safety, building walls around their hearts, that loss of control should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like hope. Chad arrived at the Bellagio Conservatory at 9:30, half an hour early. He had not been this nervous since he was 17 years old. His security team waited outside, giving him space. Inside, the conservatory was filled with thousands of flowers arranged in elaborate summer displays. Bright yellows and oranges and reds. The air smelled sweet and earthy. Tourists walked through slowly, taking photos, marveling at the artistry. Chad paced near the entrance, checking his watch every few minutes. He had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on dark jeans and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Casual but put together. He wanted to look like someone Michelle might want to spend the day with, not like a casino owner, a crime boss, or any of the other things he actually was. At exactly 10 o'clock, Michelle walked through the entrance. She wore a yellow sundress that made her look like she was made of light. Her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. When she saw Chad, her face lit up with a smile that made his chest ache. "You came," she said, walking up to him. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought maybe you'd realize this was crazy. We're strangers. I live in Portland. You live here. This doesn't make sense." Chad stepped closer, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume. Something light and floral. "It doesn't make sense," he agreed. "But I haven't been able to think about anything else since you left last night." They walked through the garden slowly. Michelle stopped to admire the flowers, pointing out arrangements she particularly loved. A waterfall of orange and red blooms. A tree covered in purple orchids. She told him about the school garden her students had planted, how one little girl insisted on talking to the tomato plants every day to help them grow. Chad found himself relaxing. The nervousness faded as they talked. Michelle had a way of making everything feel natural, like they had known each other for years instead of hours. They left the conservatory and walked down the strip, past the dancing fountains at the Bellagio, past the fake Eiffel Tower and the fake Statue of Liberty. "This city is so strange," Michelle said, laughing. "You can see Paris and New York and Venice all in one afternoon without leaving Nevada." "It's built on fantasy," Chad replied. "People come here to escape reality for a while." "Is that why you stay? To escape reality?" The question was more perceptive than she knew. Chad considered his answer carefully. "I stay because this is where I built something of my own. Something different from what I inherited." He was still being vague about his business, but Michelle did not push. Instead, she asked about the Meridian, about his design process, about what other buildings he would create if he could. Chad talked about his love for Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture, about designing spaces that worked with nature instead of against it. Michelle listened with genuine interest, asking smart questions that showed she understood what he was trying to say. They had lunch at a small Italian restaurant off the strip, the kind of place locals knew about but tourists never found. The owner recognized Chad and gave them the best table, tucked in a corner with soft lighting and white tablecloths. They ordered pasta and shared stories about their lives. Michelle talked about growing up in rural Oregon, about summers spent hiking in the Cascade Mountains. Chad talked about Chicago winters, about architecture tours along the river with his mother when he was young. After lunch, they walked through the Las Vegas Arts District. Michelle was delighted by the galleries and murals covering the buildings. Street art transformed blank walls into stories, a phoenix rising from flames, a woman's face covered in flowers, a geometric pattern that seemed to move as you walked past it. Chad watched Michelle more than he watched the art. The way her eyes lit up, the way she pulled out her phone to take photos, the way she unconsciously reached for his hand as they crossed the street, then seemed surprised by her own action but did not let go. The hands fit together perfectly. When the afternoon heat became too intense, they escaped into the Mob Museum. Michelle laughed at the choice. "A museum about organized crime? Is this your idea of a romantic date?" Chad felt a chill despite the air conditioning. If she knew how close to home this museum hit, would she still be holding his hand? "I thought it might be interesting," he said carefully. "History and all that." They walked through exhibits about prohibition, about famous gangsters, about the FBI's efforts to combat organized crime. Chad felt uncomfortable looking at displays about men like his father, men who built empires on violence and fear. But he also saw Michelle's curiosity, her questions about the social conditions that created these criminal networks, her thoughtful observations about poverty and opportunity. "It's sad, really," Michelle said, standing in front of a display about families torn apart by gang violence. "All this pain and loss, just for money and power. Like those things could ever be worth destroying lives." Chad said nothing. He thought about his own choices, about the empire he had inherited and the slow, difficult work of transforming it into something less destructive. He wanted to tell Michelle everything, but fear held him back. Fear that she would look at him differently. Fear that she would walk away. As evening approached, they walked to the Link Promenade. The high roller observation wheel turned slowly against the sky, each rotation taking 30 minutes. They stood on the pedestrian bridge overlooking the promenade, watching people flow past below. Street performers played music. Couples walked hand in hand. The day was ending, and neither of them wanted it to end. "I should get back," Michelle said softly, though she did not move. "My friends are probably wondering where I've been all day." Chad nodded, still holding her hand. The sky was turning colors now, deep orange and pink and purple. Desert sunsets were different from anywhere else, the dry air making the colors more intense. "Chad," Michelle said, turning to face him. "What is this? Because it feels like something, and I need to know if I'm crazy." He could have protected himself. He could have played it casual, non-committal. Instead, Chad pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. "You're not crazy. I don't know what this is either, but it's something. You're something." "I live 1,000 miles away," Michelle whispered. "You clearly have a life here that's important and complicated. I have a classroom full of kids depending on me. This can't work." "I know. But I can't stop thinking about you either." Chad's thumb stroked her cheekbone gently. "Then don't stop thinking about me. Give me your number. Let me call you. Let's figure this out." "You're asking a lot," Michelle said, but she was leaning into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I'm asking for a chance," Chad replied. "I haven't cared about anything real in 17 years. You made me care again in one night. That means something." Michelle opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. Chad felt completely exposed, every wall he had ever built stripped away. She could see all of him in this moment. The loneliness, the fear, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have something real. She kissed him. Or maybe he kissed her. Later, neither could say who moved first. But suddenly they were kissing, soft and searching, a question and answer all at once. Chad had kissed countless women in his life. Meaningless encounters he forgot immediately. But kissing Michelle felt like coming home to a place he had never been. Like finding something he did not know he had lost. Her hands came up to rest on his chest. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The world around them faded. The noise of the promenade disappeared. There was only this. Her lips, soft and warm. Her body pressed against his. The way she sighed into the kiss. The small sound making his heart race. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Michelle looked at him with an expression that was equal parts wonder and fear. "What are we doing?" "Something crazy," Chad admitted, resting his forehead against hers. "Something that doesn't make sense. Something that might be the first real thing I've done in my entire life." Michelle smiled, her fingers playing with the collar of his shirt. "I'm scared." "Me too," Chad said honestly. "I'm terrified." "Good," Michelle whispered. "Because if you weren't scared, that would mean this didn't matter." They stood there on the bridge as the sky darkened and the city lights began to glow. Chad held Michelle like she might disappear if he let go. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. For the first time in 17 years, Chad felt completely present. Not thinking about the past or worrying about the future. Just here, now, with this woman who had somehow seen through every defense he had. "I have to go home tomorrow," Michelle said quietly. "Back to Portland. Back to my real life." This is real too, Chad replied. This is the most real thing I've felt in years. Michelle looked up at him. Will you really call me? Every day if you'll let me. That's a lot of phone calls. I have a lot to say, Chad said. And I want to hear everything about your life. Your students. Your art. What you have for breakfast. All of it. Michelle laughed softly. You're going to get bored of me very quickly. Impossible, Chad said, kissing her forehead. I don't think I could ever get bored of you. They exchanged numbers. Michelle programmed her contact information into his phone with a little heart emoji next to her name. Chad saw it and smiled, something he rarely did. They walked back toward the strip, their hands intertwined, neither ready for the evening to end but knowing it had to. At the entrance to Michelle's hotel, they stopped. One more kiss, longer this time, deeper. A promise and a goodbye all mixed together. When Michelle finally pulled away and walked into the lobby, Chad stood outside watching until she disappeared into the elevator. His security chief pulled up in the car. Chad got in but said nothing. His mind was racing. His carefully ordered life had just been completely disrupted by a schoolteacher from Portland who sketched in casinos and saw straight through him. He should be panicking. He should be planning how to protect himself from this vulnerability. Instead, he was already planning when to call her. Michelle flew back to Portland on Sunday morning. By Sunday evening, her phone rang. Chad's name appeared on the screen, and her heart jumped in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. She answered on the second ring. Hi, she said, trying to sound casual. Hi. Chad's voice was warm through the phone. How was your flight? Long, cramped. The usual. Michelle settled onto her couch, tucking her legs under her. How's Vegas? Empty without you. Michelle smiled. That was smooth. I'm out of practice with this, Chad admitted. I don't usually do this. What? Make phone calls. Care about someone enough to want to hear about their day. The honesty in his voice made Michelle's chest tighten. Well, my day was boring. Unpacked. Did laundry. Meal prepped for the week. Very exciting stuff. Tell me anyway, Chad said. I want to know. So Michelle told him. About the groceries she bought at the farmer's market. About the pasta sauce she made from scratch. About her neighbor's cat that sometimes sat outside her window. Small, ordinary details that made up her life. Chad listened to all of it, asking questions, genuinely interested. They talked for 2 hours before Michelle finally said she needed to sleep. She had school in the morning. Can I call you tomorrow? Chad asked. I'd like that, Michelle replied. The next night, Chad called again. And the night after that. And the night after that. It became their routine. Michelle would finish her school day, grade papers, make dinner. Around 7 o'clock Pacific time, her phone would ring. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Michelle told him about her students. The little boy who insisted on wearing a cape every day because he was practicing to be a superhero. The girl who wrote stories during free time and asked Michelle to help her spell complicated words. The class hamster that escaped and they found sleeping in the reading corner. Chad found himself looking forward to these stories, these glimpses into a world so different from his own. Chad told her about his work, though he was still careful about details. He talked about design projects, about his efforts to improve working conditions for his employees, about the complicated politics of running a large business. He did not talk about the criminal elements he was trying to eliminate, but Michelle could sense there was more beneath the surface. She did not push. She trusted that he would tell her when he was ready. As the weeks passed, something shifted in Chad. His business associates noticed it first. In meetings, Chad was more patient, more willing to consider solutions that benefited everyone instead of just maximizing profit. He asked questions about employees' families, remembered birthdays, showed interest in people as humans rather than just workers. His head of security mentioned it one day. "You're different lately, boss." Softer somehow. Chad did not deny it. "Is that a problem?" "No," the man replied carefully. "Just different. Not bad different. Just noticeable." The truth was that talking to Michelle every night was changing how Chad saw the world. She talked about kindness and connection and the importance of seeing people as whole humans with stories and struggles. She talked about her teaching philosophy, how every child deserved patience and second chances and someone who believed in them. These conversations seeped into Chad's thinking, influencing his decisions in ways both subtle and profound. He found himself asking different questions in business meetings. Not just what's most profitable, but what's most fair. Not just what protects us, but what helps everyone. His lawyers noticed he was more interested in finding legal solutions than shortcuts. His accountants noticed he was willing to take smaller profits if it meant treating people better. But the biggest change was in his efforts to legitimize his operations. Chad had been slowly working to transition everything legal for years, but Michelle gave him new urgency. He wanted to be someone worthy of her. He wanted to look her in the eyes and tell her the complete truth without shame. He wanted to build a life that she could be part of without compromise. He met with federal investigators, carefully, through lawyers, exploring what cooperation might look like. He closed down the gambling operations that existed in gray areas of the law. He sold off businesses that could not be cleaned up. It was expensive and complicated and sometimes dangerous. Other organizations did not appreciate him changing the established order. But Chad pushed forward anyway, motivated by nightly phone calls with a woman who made him want to be better. During one call in late August, Michelle asked, "When do I get to see you again?" Chad had been thinking about this constantly. "I could come to Portland. If you want. I'd like to see your world the way you saw mine." "I'd like that too," Michelle said softly. "When?" "September. I need to clear some things up here first. But September works." "September," Michelle repeated, and Chad could hear the smile in her voice. "That feels both too far away and too soon." "I know exactly what you mean." They planned his visit over the following weeks. Michelle would take a few days off work. She would show him Portland, introduce him to her life. The conversation about where he would stay was awkward until Michelle finally said, "You could stay with me. If you want. I have a small apartment, but there's room." Chad's heart raced. Staying with her meant sharing space, being close, deepening their connection in ways that phone calls could not. "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified," Michelle admitted. "But yes, I'm sure. I want you here. I want to wake up and have coffee with you. I want to show you my favorite bookstore and the park where I walk on weekends. I want this to be real, not just voices on the phone." "It's already real," Chad said. "But I want that too. All of it." As September approached, both of them felt the anticipation building. Their phone calls became longer, more intimate. They talked about their fears and hopes. Michelle admitted she was worried he would be disappointed by her ordinary life. Chad admitted he was worried she would see him in his daily life and realize he was not as good as she thought. "I don't think you're perfect," Michelle said during one of these conversations. "I think you're complicated and trying to do better. That's different. That's more interesting than perfect." Chad was in his penthouse when she said this, looking out over the Las Vegas lights. "I want to be worthy of you." "You already are," Michelle replied. "You just need to believe it." The week before his Portland trip, Chad could barely focus on work. His mind was constantly in Oregon, with Michelle, counting down the days. He packed and repacked his suitcase 3 times. He bought a new jacket, then worried it was trying too hard. He felt like a teenager preparing for a first date, nervous and excited and completely out of his depth. His mother called him that week from Chicago. They talked regularly, but she could sense something was different. "There's someone, isn't there?" she asked. "I can hear it in your voice." Chad did not see the point in denying it. "Her name is Michelle. She's a teacher in Portland. I met her in July. And you're happy?" Chad paused, considering the question. Happy was not a word he used often. But yes, talking to Michelle every night made him happy. Thinking about seeing her made him happy. "Yes," he said. "I'm happy." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Good. You deserve that, baby. You deserve to be happy." The night before his flight to Portland, Chad could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. What if the chemistry did not translate from phone to in person? What if Michelle realized he was not what she wanted? What if he disappointed her? But deeper than the fear was excitement. He was going to see Michelle. He was going to hold her again, kiss her again, be in her space and learn the details of her life. He was going to spend days with her, not just hours. They would wake up together and have breakfast together and exist in the same place for more than stolen moments. His phone buzzed with a text from Michelle. "Can't sleep. Too excited. Too nervous. Is it tomorrow yet?" Chad smiled and typed back. "Same. I'll see you tomorrow. I can't wait." "Me neither," Michelle replied. "Safe flight. Dream about me." "Always," Chad wrote back. He meant it. For 3 months, Michelle had been in his thoughts constantly. She had changed him from 1,000 miles away, just by being herself, just by showing him that life could be more than power and control and loneliness. She had given him hope that transformation was possible, that he could be someone different, someone better. As Chad finally drifted toward sleep, his last thought was of Michelle. Her warm brown eyes, her gentle laugh, the way she had looked at him on that bridge in Las Vegas and kissed him like he was worth the risk. Tomorrow, he would see her again. Tomorrow, this would become more real. And despite all his fears and doubts, Chad could not wait. Chad's plane landed at Portland International Airport on a Friday afternoon in early September. The sky was overcast, a light drizzle falling, so different from the perpetual sunshine of Las Vegas. He collected his bag and walked through the arrivals area, scanning the crowd. When he saw Michelle waiting by the baggage claim, his entire body relaxed. She wore jeans and a green sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked beautiful and real and exactly like he remembered. Michelle saw him at the same moment. Her face lit up with a smile that made the 3-month wait worth it. She walked toward him quickly, and when they reached each other, there was a brief awkward moment where neither knew quite what to do. Then Chad dropped his bag and pulled her into his arms. "Hi," he murmured into her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "Hi," Michelle replied, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. "You're here. You're actually here." "I'm here," Chad confirmed, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "God, I missed you." "Me too," Michelle said. "Phone calls are not the same." Chad cupped her face and kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper as 3 months of distance melted away. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Michelle laughed. "We should probably not make out in the middle of the airport." "Probably not," Chad agreed, but he did not let go of her hand. The drive to Michelle's apartment took 30 minutes through Friday afternoon traffic. She lived in the Alberta Arts District, a neighborhood with colorful houses and local shops and murals on every corner. Her apartment was on the second floor of an old craftsman house that had been converted into units. The stairs creaked as they climbed. Michelle unlocked her door and stepped inside, suddenly nervous. "It's small," she said, almost apologetically. "Nothing like your penthouse." Chad walked in and looked around. The apartment was tiny, maybe 600 square feet. A living room with a couch and bookshelf. A kitchen barely big enough for one person. A bedroom he could see through an open door. But it was warm and full of life. Plants sat on the windowsills. Books were stacked everywhere. Michelle's artwork hung on the walls, watercolors and sketches in simple frames. And covering the refrigerator were dozens of children's drawings. Stick figures and crooked houses and dogs with too many legs. Each one signed with a child's name in uneven letters. "Your students?" Chad asked, walking over to look more closely. "They give me pictures all the time," Michelle explained. "I can't throw them away, so they end up here. That one is supposed to be me teaching math. See the glasses? I don't wear glasses, but apparently Tommy thinks I should." Chad smiled, studying each drawing. He could see Michelle's influence in them, the encouragement that made these children feel comfortable expressing themselves. "Your penthouse is bigger," he said, turning to face her. "But this is a home. Mine is just a place to sleep." Michelle's expression softened. "Thank you for saying that." They spent the evening getting reacquainted. The physical distance of 3 months meant there was a shyness between them now, a need to rediscover each other's presence. They ordered takeout Thai food and ate on the couch, their legs touching, talking about small things. Michelle's week at school. Chad's flight. The strange feeling of being in the same room instead of on the phone. After dinner, Michelle made tea and they sat closer together, the conversation flowing more easily now. Chad's arm was around her shoulders. Michelle's hand rested on his knee. It felt natural and right and terrifying all at once. "What do you want to do this weekend?" Michelle asked. "I have a whole list of places to show you." "Whatever you want," Chad replied. "I'm just happy to be here." The next morning, they woke up on opposite sides of Michelle's bed, both fully clothed, having fallen asleep talking the night before. The awkwardness of sharing a bed for the first time had disappeared somewhere around midnight when Michelle had yawned and asked if he minded if she closed her eyes for just a minute. Chad had pulled her close, and they had both drifted off tangled together. Now, in the soft morning light filtering through her curtains, Chad watched Michelle sleep for a moment. Her face was peaceful, relaxed. One hand curled under her cheek. She looked younger like this, without the slight worry line she got between her eyebrows when she was thinking hard about something. Michelle's eyes opened slowly. When she saw Chad watching her, she smiled sleepily. "Hi." "Hi," Chad replied. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Michelle admitted. "You?" "Same." They had coffee on her small balcony, overlooking the quiet street below. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and fresh. Michelle pointed out her favorite house across the street, painted bright purple with yellow trim. She told him about her neighbors, the couple who had lived there for 40 years and grew tomatoes in their front yard every summer. After breakfast, they walked to the Saturday market downtown. The market stretched along the waterfront, hundreds of booths selling handmade crafts, fresh produce, hot food. Michelle knew many of the vendors by name. She introduced Chad to the woman who made pottery, the man who sold fresh lavender, the family who ran a booth with Ethiopian food. Chad bought Michelle a necklace from a jewelry maker, a simple silver pendant shaped like Oregon. She protested it was too much, but he insisted. "So you remember this weekend," he said, fastening it around her neck. "I don't need jewelry to remember," Michelle replied, touching the pendant. But thank you. I love it. They ate lunch at a food cart, sharing Korean tacos and sweet potato fries. They walked through Powell's city of books, getting lost in the maze of rooms and shelves. Michelle showed him the children's section where she bought books for her classroom. Chad found the architecture section and spent 20 minutes browsing, Michelle watching him with fondness as he got absorbed in a book about sustainable design. On Sunday, they visited the Japanese gardens in the hills above the city. The gardens were peaceful and perfect, every plant placed with intention. They walked slowly through the different sections, holding hands, comfortable in the silence. At one viewpoint, they could see all of Portland spread out below, the city looking small and manageable from this height. It's beautiful here, Chad said. Different from Vegas, but beautiful. Less flashy, Michelle agreed. But I love it. This is home. That evening, back at Michelle's apartment, they cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen. It was awkward and fun, bumping into each other, laughing when Chad nearly dropped the cutting board. They ate pasta at her small table, talking about the weekend, about how strange and wonderful it was to finally be together in person. After dinner, they settled on the couch with glasses of wine. Michelle curled into Chad's side, her head on his chest, his arm around her. They sat like that for a while, just being close, feeling each other breathe. Chad, Michelle said finally, her voice quiet. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Chad tensed slightly. He knew this was coming. He had known it since the moment he decided to visit. Okay. Michelle sat up, turning to face him. Her expression was serious but not unkind. What exactly do you do? I know you own the Meridian. I know you talk about legitimizing your business. But you've never told me what you're legitimizing it from. And I need to know, because this is becoming real. We're becoming real. And I can't move forward without understanding who you are. Chad looked at her, at the trust and worry mixed in her eyes. This was the moment. He could lose her right now if he told the truth. Or he could lose her eventually by continuing to hide it. Either way, the risk was enormous. He took a breath and began to speak. My father ran a criminal organization. Gambling, money laundering, things that existed outside the law. When he was killed, I inherited it. I was 17 years old, and suddenly I was responsible for an empire I never asked for. Michelle's face remained neutral, listening. Chad continued. I've spent the last 17 years trying to transform it. Trying to make everything legitimate. It's been slow and complicated and sometimes dangerous. But I'm doing it. I'm almost there. The Meridian is completely clean. Most of my other businesses are too. I'm working with federal investigators to help shut down the operations that can't be cleaned up. He paused, searching Michelle's face for reaction. She was processing, thinking, her teacher's mind working through the information. I'm not my father, Chad said, his voice rougher now, more vulnerable. I've tried to be different, better, but I can't erase where I came from or the choices I made to survive in that world. All I can do is keep moving forward, keep trying to be someone worthy of a life that's not built on fear and violence. Michelle was quiet for a long moment. Chad felt his heart pounding, waiting for her response, terrified of what she might say. Michelle stood up from the couch and walked to the window. Her back was to Chad, her arms wrapped around herself. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Chad remained seated, every muscle tense, watching her process what he had just told her. He wanted to say something, to explain more, to make her understand. But he forced himself to stay quiet and let her think. Outside, the Portland evening was settling into darkness. Street lights flickered on. A couple walked past on the sidewalk below, laughing about something. Normal people living normal lives. Michelle pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her breath fogging it slightly. "Say something," Chad finally whispered. "Please." Michelle turned to face him. Her eyes were wet but no tears had fallen. "I need you to tell me everything. Not the sanitized version. The real version. What did you do? What choices did you make that you're ashamed of?" Chad swallowed hard. This was harder than he expected. Harder than facing down rivals or negotiating with federal agents. Because Michelle mattered in a way nothing else ever had. "There was violence," he said slowly. "Not often, but when necessary. To defend territory, to send messages, to maintain order. I never killed anyone myself, but I gave orders that led to people being hurt." Michelle flinched but did not look away. "I ran gambling operations that took money from people who couldn't afford to lose it," Chad continued. "I laundered money for organizations involved in things worse than what I did. I paid off officials to look the other way. I lived in moral gray areas and told myself it was acceptable because I was better than my father, better than the truly violent criminals. But better than terrible is still not good." He stood up now, needing to move, his hands clenched at his sides. "I'm not asking you to forgive those choices. I'm not asking you to pretend they didn't happen. I'm just asking you to understand that I'm trying to be different now. That meeting you made me want to be someone who deserves you." "You can't change who you are just for me," Michelle said quietly. "That's not how this works." "I'm not," Chad insisted. "I've been changing for years. Slowly. But you made me want to accelerate it. You made me realize that the life I was living wasn't actually living at all. It was just existing. Surviving. Staying safe by staying alone." Michelle walked back to the couch but did not sit. She stood in front of Chad, close enough that he could reach out and touch her if he dared. "Are you in danger? Are you being investigated? Could you go to prison?" "I have immunity agreements in place," Chad explained. "As long as I cooperate and help shut down certain operations, I'm protected. It's complicated and not guaranteed, but my lawyers are confident. As for danger, there's always some. Other organizations don't love that I'm working with federal investigators. But I have good security. I'm careful." "This is a lot," Michelle said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is so much more than I expected when I met you in that casino." "I know," Chad replied. "And I understand if it's too much. If you want me to leave, if you want to end this now before it gets more complicated, I'll understand. I won't blame you. You deserve someone simple, someone safe, someone whose past doesn't come with risks and complications." Michelle looked up at him, studying his face. Chad forced himself not to look away, to let her see everything. The fear, the shame, the desperate hope that she might accept him anyway. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Michelle asked. "Because I was afraid," Chad admitted. "Afraid of exactly this moment. Afraid of seeing you look at me differently. Afraid of losing you before I really had you. I know that's selfish. I know I should have been honest from the start. But I've spent 17 years protecting myself by keeping everyone at a distance, and you're the first person who made me want to let someone in." Tears were falling down Michelle's cheeks now. "You should have trusted me." "You're right," Chad said. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Michelle wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "I need some time to think. This is a lot to process." Chad nodded, his heart sinking. "Do you want me to get a hotel? Give you space?" "No," Michelle said quickly. "I want you here. I just need to think." She walked to her bedroom and closed the door softly. Chad sat back down on the couch, his head in his hands. He had known this was a risk. He had known telling her the truth might end everything. But knowing it intellectually was different from living through it, from sitting in her apartment waiting to find out if she could accept him or if this was over. An hour passed. Chet did not move from the couch. He heard Michelle moving around in her bedroom, heard water running in her bathroom. He thought about all the phone calls over the past 3 months, all the ways she had changed him just by being herself. He thought about how empty his life would feel going back to Vegas without her. Finally, the bedroom door opened. Michelle came out wearing pajamas, her face washed clean of tears. She walked over to the couch and sat down beside Chad, not touching him but close enough that he could feel her warmth. "I've been thinking about my students," Michelle said. "About this little boy I had 2 years ago. His father was in prison. His mother was struggling with addiction. He came to school angry every day, got in fights, destroyed his work when it wasn't perfect. Other teachers had given up on him. But I saw something else. I saw a kid who was scared and hurt and needed someone to believe he could be better than his circumstances." Chad listened, not sure where she was going with this. "I worked with him all year," Michelle continued. "Some days I wanted to give up. Some days he made me so frustrated I cried in my car after school. But I kept showing up, kept believing he could change. By the end of the year, he was a different kid. Not perfect, but trying, growing, becoming someone new." She turned to look at Chad now, her eyes meeting his. "I'm not comparing you to a 7-year-old, but I believe people can change. I believe we're more than our worst choices. I believe that trying to be better matters more than where we started." Hope flickered in Chad's chest, fragile and terrifying. "I'm scared," Michelle said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm scared of your world. I'm scared of the danger. I'm scared that loving you means accepting things I never thought I'd accept. But Chad, I'm more scared of walking away from something real because it's complicated. I'm tired of choosing safe over authentic. You're saying you can accept this?" Chad asked, barely breathing. "You can accept me?" "I'm saying I love you," Michelle replied, tears streaming down her face again. "I fell in love with you over 3 months of phone calls. I fell in love with how you listened to stories about my students, how you talked about designing buildings that honored people, how you were trying to be better than what you inherited. And now that I know the whole truth, I still love you. Maybe even more, because you were brave enough to tell me." Chad's own eyes were wet now. "I love you too. God, Michelle, I love you so much. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You make me want to be someone worthy of you." "You already are," Michelle said, moving closer to him. "You just need to believe it." Chad pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. They sat like that for a long time, clinging to each other, both crying and laughing at the same time. The relief of honesty, the terror of vulnerability, the overwhelming feeling of being truly seen and accepted anyway. "This won't be easy," Michelle said into his chest. "We have a lot to figure out. The distance, your work, my career, all of it." "I know," Chad replied. "But we'll figure it out together. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll move here if you want. I'll keep flying back and forth. I'll make it work because losing you is not an option." Michelle pulled back to look at him, her hands cupping his face. "I don't want you to give up your life for me. I want us to build something together. Something that works for both of us." Chad kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of every emotion coursing through him. Relief and love and gratitude and hope. Michelle kissed him back with equal intensity, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Chad rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. You already are, Michelle whispered. Now you just have to believe it. 1 month after Chad's visit to Portland, Michelle flew to Las Vegas. It was late October, and she had a week off for fall break. This time, she was not visiting as a tourist escaping a bachelorette party. She was visiting as Chad's girlfriend, coming to see his life, his world, the parts of himself he had only described over the phone. Chad picked her up from the airport himself. No driver, no security visible. He kissed her in the arrivals area like he had been holding his breath for a month and could finally breathe again. I missed you, he said against her lips. I missed you too, Michelle replied, her arms tight around his neck. Show me everything. I want to see your whole life. They drove to the Meridian first. Michelle had seen it before, but this time was different. This time, Chad walked her through the back offices, introduced her to his managers and staff. She watched how people interacted with him. There was respect, yes, but also genuine warmth. His head of housekeeping hugged him and showed him photos of her new grandchild. His lead chef argued with him good-naturedly about a new menu item. These were not people who feared their boss. These were people who trusted him. You see that woman over there? Chad said quietly, nodding toward a blackjack dealer. 3 years ago, her husband died and left her with medical debt she couldn't pay. I covered it. She doesn't know it was me. My accountant set it up to look like an insurance payout. Michelle looked at him with new understanding. You do that often. When I can, Chad said. Money I have. What I didn't have for a long time was purpose for it. That evening, Chad took Michelle to Henderson to meet his mother. The modest house was exactly as Michelle had imagined from Chad's descriptions. Small but immaculate, with a garden in the front yard and wind chimes on the porch. Chad's mother answered the door before they could knock, a petite woman in her 60s with kind eyes and the same strong jawline as her son. You must be Michelle, she said, pulling Michelle into a hug before any formal introductions. I'm Gloria. Come in, come in. I made lasagna. Over dinner, Gloria told stories about Chad as a child. How he used to build elaborate structures out of blocks and get upset when they fell down. How he would draw pictures of buildings on every scrap of paper he could find. How he had wanted to design museums and libraries, places that would make people feel something. He was such a sweet boy, Gloria said, looking at her son with love and sadness mixed together. Then his father died, and he had to grow up too fast. Had to become someone harder than he should have been. Mom, Chad said quietly, uncomfortable with the emotion in her voice. No, she should know, Gloria insisted, turning to Michelle. She should know that the man you see now, the one trying to make everything right, that's who he really is. The other stuff, the empire and the fear and all that, that was survival. This is who he was always meant to be. Michelle reached across the table and took Chad's hand. I know, she said softly. After dinner, while Chad was washing dishes, Gloria pulled Michelle aside in the living room. He's different since he met you, she said. I hear it in his voice when we talk. He's lighter, happier. You're good for him. He's good for me too, Michelle replied honestly. He makes me brave. The next day, Chad took Michelle to meet with his lawyers. She had asked to understand the legal situation fully, and Chad had agreed. The law office was downtown, sleek and professional. 2 lawyers spent an hour explaining the immunity agreements, the cooperation with federal investigators, the timeline for full legitimization of all Chad's business interests. Mr. Melvin has been extraordinarily cooperative, one of the lawyers said. His information has led to several significant arrests. In exchange, He has immunity from prosecution for past activities, provided he completes the transition to fully legitimate operations within the agreed time frame. And the danger? Michelle asked directly. Is he in danger from the people he's testifying against? The lawyers exchanged glances. There's always some risk, the senior partner admitted. But Mr. Melvin has excellent security. And frankly, he's been strategic about this. He's not testifying in open court, just providing information. Most people don't even know he's cooperating. Michelle nodded, processing this. It was not completely safe, but nothing in life was. At least Chad was being smart about it. That night, back at Chad's penthouse, Michelle stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the strip. Chad came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That your world is bigger than I understood," Michelle said. "More complex, but also that you're handling it the right way. You're not running from your past. You're transforming it. Does it scare you?" Chad asked quietly. Michelle turned in his arms to face him. "A little, but not enough to leave. Not even close." Chad kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," Michelle said, smiling against his mouth. "Terror means it matters." They spent the rest of the week together. Michelle sat in on meetings where Chad made decisions about the Meridian's operations. She watched him negotiate fairly with vendors, approve raises for employees, donate to local schools. She saw the man behind the reputation. She saw who he was becoming. On her last night in Vegas, they had dinner at the Italian restaurant where they had eaten on their first day together. The owner remembered them, gave them the same corner table. They held hands across the tablecloth and talked about the future. "I don't know how this works long term," Michelle admitted. "I can't leave my students, but I hate being apart from you." "We'll figure it out," Chad promised. "I'll come to Portland as much as I can. You'll come here when you can. And we'll keep talking every night. We'll make it work because the alternative is unacceptable." Michelle squeezed his hand. "I believe you." As they left the restaurant, walking through the warm October night, Michelle realized something important. She had come to Vegas worried she might discover something about Chad that would make her doubt him. Instead, she had discovered that he was exactly who she thought he was. Complicated, yes. Flawed, absolutely. But genuine in his efforts to be better. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. It was a cold December evening when everything changed. Michelle had come to Vegas for Christmas break, and they were standing on Chad's penthouse balcony, bundled in coats against the unusual chill. The strip glittered below them, but neither was paying attention to the lights. They were focused on a conversation they had been avoiding for months. "We can't keep doing this forever," Michelle said quietly. "Flying back and forth. Living in two different cities. Never knowing when we'll see each other next. It's not sustainable." Chad knew she was right. The past few months had been wonderful but exhausting. He was flying to Portland twice a month, sometimes more. Michelle came to Vegas when she could, but they were always saying goodbye, always counting down to the next visit, always living in the spaces between being together. "I know," Chad replied, pulling her closer against the cold. "So what do we do?" "I can't leave Portland," Michelle said, and he could hear the pain in her voice. "My students need consistency. I have a contract. And honestly, that's where my life is. My friends, my apartment, my work. I can't just walk away from all of that." "I would never ask you to," Chad said immediately. "Your teaching matters. Those kids need you. But you can't leave Vegas either," Michelle continued. The Meridian, your businesses, your responsibilities. You've built an empire here. How could you just walk away? Chad was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city he had called home for years. The city where he had built his reputation, his wealth, his carefully controlled life. He thought about the Meridian, about the legitimate businesses he had created, about the network of people who depended on him. Then he thought about Michelle, about waking up next to her in her small Portland apartment, about the peace he felt in her presence, about how she had transformed him from someone who survived into someone who actually lived. It's not an empire if I'm trapped by it, Chad said slowly. And you were right that first night we met. I've been carrying weight that doesn't show. I'm tired, Michelle. I'm so tired of being the untouchable. Tired of being feared instead of known. Tired of controlling everything because I'm afraid of what happens if I let go. Michelle looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. What are you saying? I'm saying I choose you, Chad replied, his voice firm with certainty. I choose Portland. I choose a life where I can be human instead of untouchable. I can manage my businesses remotely. The transition to legitimate operations means I can step back from daily management. I don't need to be here physically for everything. Chad, that's a huge decision, Michelle said, her voice shaking. You can't just uproot your entire life for me. I'm not doing it just for you, Chad said, cupping her face in his hands. I'm doing it for us. For me. Because meeting you showed me that the life I was living wasn't really living at all. It was existing. Going through motions. Building something I didn't even want because I was too afraid to admit I wanted something different. Tears streamed down Michelle's face. Are you sure? Really sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Chad said. You make me want to be someone better. Someone real. With you, I don't have to be the untouchable. I can just be Chad. And that's worth more than any empire. They kissed then, standing on the balcony 50 floors above Las Vegas, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. It was a beginning and an ending all at once. The end of Chad's life in Vegas as he knew it. The beginning of something new, something unknown, something that scared him and excited him in equal measure. The next morning, Chad called an emergency meeting with his lawyers and top business managers. He laid out his plan. He would transition to remote management for most operations. His security chief would become the general manager of the Meridian, with full authority to make day-to-day decisions. His other businesses would operate with increased autonomy under trusted managers. Chad would visit Vegas once a month for critical meetings, but otherwise, he was moving to Portland. His team was shocked but not entirely surprised. They had seen the changes in him over the past year. The softening, the increased focus on legitimate operations, the way he smiled more, stressed less, seemed more at peace. You're really doing this? His head of security asked. Leaving Vegas for a woman? I'm leaving Vegas for a life, Chad corrected. Michelle is part of that life, but it's bigger than just her. It's about being someone I can be proud of. The real work began immediately. Chad had been working toward full legitimization for years, but now he accelerated the timeline. He met with federal investigators weekly, providing detailed information about remaining illegal operations in exchange for their final closures. He sold off businesses that could not be cleaned up. He severed ties with organizations that operated in moral gray areas. It was expensive and complicated and sometimes dangerous. There were threats, anonymous messages warning him against cooperation, a brick through the window of one of his restaurants. His security team had to increase precautions, but Chad pushed forward, motivated by the vision of a life with Michelle. A clean life, A life where he could look at himself in the mirror without shame. Michelle supported him through all of it, even though the danger scared her. She flew to Vegas when she could. They talked on the phone every night, Chad updating her on progress, Michelle reminding him why it mattered. On particularly difficult days, when Chad questioned whether it was worth it, Michelle would say, "You're not doing this for me. You're doing this for yourself. I'm just here cheering you on." The work took 18 months. 18 months of meetings and negotiations and careful strategic moves. 18 months of dismantling an empire and rebuilding something legitimate in its place. 18 months of Chad slowly becoming free from the weight he had carried since his father died. During those 18 months, Chad split his time between Vegas and Portland. He rented an apartment in Michelle's neighborhood, close enough to walk to her place in 5 minutes. He learned Portland's rhythms, the coffee shops and bookstores, the parks where Michelle liked to walk, the school where she taught, though he only visited once because Michelle kept her professional and personal lives separate. He met her friends, who were skeptical at first but gradually warmed to him when they saw how happy Michelle was. He attended school events where Michelle's students performed, sitting in the back and watching her interact with the children, seeing the love and patience she brought to her work. And slowly, Chad became someone different. Not completely different. He was still sharp and strategic, still commanded respect when he entered a room. But the hardness around his edges softened. He laughed more easily. He let his guard down. He let himself be vulnerable, be human, be imperfect. Michelle gave him permission to be all those things just by loving him exactly as he was. In March, 18 months after that balcony conversation in Vegas, Chad signed the final papers making all his operations completely legitimate. He sat in his lawyer's office in Las Vegas, his hand cramping from all the signatures, and felt a weight lift that he had been carrying for 20 years. "That's it," his lawyer said, gathering the papers. "Everything is clean. Congratulations, Mr. Melvin. You're officially a legitimate businessman." Chad sat back in his chair, letting the reality sink in. It was done. The empire his father had built was gone, transformed into something legal, something he could be proud of. He was free. That night, he flew back to Portland. Not to his apartment, but to Michelle's. He had a key now, let himself in quietly. Michelle was grading papers at her kitchen table, wearing glasses and a ponytail, looking beautiful in the way that ordinary moments made her beautiful. "Hey," she said, looking up and smiling. "You're back early. I thought you had meetings all day." "I finished early," Chad said, walking over to her. "I finished everything, actually." Michelle stood, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Everything? You mean everything?" "Everything," Chad confirmed. "It's all legal. All clean. I'm done." Michelle threw her arms around him, and Chad held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her. This was home. Not Vegas. Not some penthouse overlooking artificial lights. This. Them. And for the first time in his adult life, Chad Melvin felt completely, utterly free. 2 weeks after signing the final papers, Chad invited Michelle to his Portland apartment for dinner. He told her he was cooking, which made her laugh because Chad's cooking skills were limited at best. But she showed up at 7 o'clock wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair down, looking exactly like the woman he had fallen in love with in a Las Vegas casino 10 months earlier. The apartment smelled like takeout Thai food, not home cooking. Michelle laughed when she saw the containers on the counter. "You said you were cooking." "I said I was making dinner," Chad corrected with a smile. "I never specified how." They ate at his small dining table, talking about Michelle's week at school and Chad's final meetings in Vegas. The conversation was easy and comfortable, the way it always was between them now. But Michelle noticed Chad seemed nervous, his leg bouncing slightly under the table, his attention drifting even as he nodded at her stories. "Are you okay?" Michelle asked, setting down her fork. "You seem distracted." Chad took a breath and stood up. "I'm nervous," he admitted. "Come here." Michelle stood, confused, and followed him to the living room. Chad turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. His palms were damp. His heart was racing so hard she could probably see his pulse in his neck. "Michelle, 10 months ago, I was living a half-life, going through motions, convinced I was fine being alone because being alone was safe. Then you walked into my casino with a sketchbook and looked at me like you could see straight through every wall I'd built. And everything changed." Michelle's eyes were already starting to fill with tears. She knew where this was going. Chad dropped to one knee, still holding her hands, looking up at her with love and vulnerability written across his face. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You made me want to be better, do better, live better. You transformed my entire life just by being in it." He released one of her hands and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. When he opened it, Michelle gasped. The ring was beautiful. A green emerald surrounded by small diamonds, set in platinum. The emerald caught the light and seemed to glow. "Emerald for hope," Chad explained, his voice thick with emotion. "For new beginnings. For the life we're building together. Michelle Jones, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of you?" "Yes," Michelle whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course yes." Chad slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. He stood and Michelle threw herself into his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. They kissed deeply, passionately, a promise sealed between them. "I love you so much," Michelle said against his lips. "So much it scares me sometimes." "Good," Chad replied, echoing his words from their first kiss. "That means it's real." They planned the wedding for June, 3 months away. Michelle wanted something simple and intimate. Chad wanted whatever made her happy. They chose a winery in the Willamette Valley, an hour outside Portland. Rolling hills covered in grapevines, a rustic barn for the reception, gardens where they could have the ceremony outdoors. Michelle's mother helped with planning, warming to Chad once she saw how happy her daughter was. Chad's mother flew in from Vegas a week before the wedding, staying with Gloria's sister who lived in Eugene. The two mothers bonded over their children's love story, both crying happy tears as they talked about how far Chad had come from the hard young man who inherited his father's empire. The wedding day was perfect. Sunny and warm, with a light breeze that kept it from being too hot. Michelle wore a simple white dress, nothing elaborate, just elegant and beautiful. She carried wildflowers from a local farm. Chad wore a dark gray suit, no tie, looking relaxed and happy in a way his Vegas associates would not have recognized. The ceremony was short and personal. They wrote their own vows. Michelle promised to always see him, really see him, even on the days when he forgot to see himself. Chad promised to choose vulnerability over protection, love over fear, her over everything else. When the officiant pronounced them married, Chad kissed Michelle like they were the only two people in the world. The small crowd of family and friends cheered. His mother cried. Michelle's father, who had been skeptical at first, clapped Chad on the shoulder afterward and said, "Take care of my girl." "With my life," Chad promised, and meant it. The reception was held in the barn, decorated with string lights and mason jars filled with more wildflowers. They had a small band playing acoustic music. The food was simple but delicious. Local wine flowed freely. Everyone was relaxed and happy, celebrating not just a wedding but the unlikely love story that had brought them all together. For their first dance, the band played a slow jazz song. Chad held Michelle close, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers against his chest. They swayed slowly, foreheads touching, existing in their own bubble despite the watching crowd. "What are you thinking?" Michelle asked softly. "That I used to think power was about control," Chad replied. "About making people fear you. About never showing weakness. But you taught me something different. Real power is allowing yourself to be vulnerable with someone who would never use it against you. Real power is trusting someone enough to let them see all of you." Michelle pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes shining. "You know what I love most about you?" "What?" "That you let me see you melt. The great untouchable Chad Melvin, melting at my touch, vulnerable to my stare. That takes more courage than anything you ever did building your empire." Chad kissed her softly, not caring that everyone was watching. "I love you, Mrs. Melvin." "I love you too," Michelle whispered back. They danced until the song ended, then through the next song and the one after that. Eventually, other couples joined them on the dance floor. Chad's mother danced with Michelle's father. Friends from Portland mixed with people from Chad's Vegas life. Two worlds that should not have fit together somehow blending beautifully. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued around them, Chad and Michelle stood at the edge of the barn, looking out over the vineyard as the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple. "This is better than any empire," Chad said, his arm around Michelle's waist. "This is home," Michelle agreed, leaning into him. They had found what they had both been searching for without knowing they were searching. Not perfection, but something real. Not safety, but something worth the risk. Not completeness from each other, but the courage to become complete within themselves. And standing there in the fading light, surrounded by love and laughter, they knew this was only the beginning. The best was yet to come. 5 years later, Chad stood in the doorway of a converted garage behind their house in the Alberta Arts District, watching his wife paint. Michelle was so absorbed in her work that she had not noticed him yet. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, paint smeared on her cheek. The late afternoon sun streamed through the skylight Chad had installed, illuminating her canvas. She was working on a series for a gallery show next month, her third solo exhibition in 2 years. Their daughter Lily was napping upstairs in the house. 3 years old, with Michelle's warm brown eyes and Chad's dark hair. She loved drawing just like her mother, covering every surface with crayon masterpieces that they could not bear to throw away. The refrigerator was covered with her artwork now, just like it had once been covered with Michelle's students' drawings. Chad smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that July night when Michelle walked into his casino. He had sold the Meridian 2 years ago to a hotel group, finally letting go of the last major tie to his Vegas life. He kept a financial stake and consulted on design decisions, but the daily operations were no longer his concern. The sale had made him wealthier than he needed to be, but more importantly, it had made him free. Now he worked as an architectural consultant, mostly for nonprofits and schools. He designed libraries and community centers and affordable housing projects, buildings that serve people instead of extracting from them. The work paid less than running casinos, but it filled him with purpose in a way his old life never had. He was finally doing what he had dreamed of as a teenager before his father died and everything changed. Michelle had gone back to teaching for 2 years after they married, but when she got pregnant with Lily, she made a difficult decision. She took a leave of absence that turned into resignation. It had been hard for her, leaving her students. But being a mother to Lily while finally pursuing her art career seriously felt like the right choice. She still volunteered at local schools, teaching art workshops, staying connected to the work she loved. Her paintings were selling now, not for huge amounts, but enough to contribute meaningfully to their household. More importantly, she was creating again. Really creating, not just sketching in stolen moments. The studio Chad built for her was filled with canvases and paints and natural light. It was her sanctuary, just like their home was their shared sanctuary. The house itself was a restored craftsman they had bought 3 years ago. Chad had overseen the renovation personally, bringing it back to its original beauty while modernizing for their family. High ceilings and original hardwood floors. A kitchen big enough for both of them to cook together. A yard where Lily could play. It was not a penthouse. It was not impressive by Vegas standards. But it was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. Michelle finally noticed Chad watching her. She smiled, setting down her brush. "How long have you been standing there?" "A few minutes," Chad admitted, walking into the studio. "I like watching you work. You get this expression on your face, like nothing else in the world exists." "That's how I feel when I paint," Michelle said, wiping her hands on a rag. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Chad pulled her close, not caring about the paint. "I know that feeling." They stood there in the studio, holding each other in the comfortable silence of people who did not need words to communicate. Through the window, Chad could see their neighborhood. The purple house across the street. Kids riding bikes on the sidewalk. A dog barking somewhere nearby. Ordinary life. Normal life. The life he never knew he wanted until Michelle showed him it was possible. "Do you ever miss it?" Michelle asked, as if reading his thoughts. Vegas, the Meridian, all of it. Chad considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the excitement, the energy, but I don't miss who I was there. I don't miss being untouchable." He pulled back to look at her. "You know what I realized the other day? I spent 17 years building walls to protect myself, and you knocked them all down in one night just by looking at me." Michelle touched his face tenderly. "You let me knock them down. That was your choice. Your courage. You made me brave enough to choose it," Chad replied. "You saw something in me I had forgotten was there." The sound of Lily waking up came through the baby monitor. Her small voice calling for Mommy and Daddy. Michelle smiled. "Duty calls." They walked back to the house together, hand in hand. Lily was standing in her crib, hair wild from sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. When she saw them, her face lit up. "Daddy! Mama! I'm awake!" Chad picked her up, hugging her tight. She smelled like baby shampoo and the apple slices she had eaten before her nap. "Hey, sunshine, did you have good dreams?" "I dreamed about painting with Mama," Lily said seriously. "Can we paint now?" Michelle laughed. "After dinner, baby. Right now we need to make food." They moved through their evening routine. Chad made pasta while Michelle set the table and helped Lily wash her hands. They ate together, Lily talking nonstop about everything and nothing the way 3-year-olds do. After dinner, Michelle did let Lily paint at the kitchen table with washable paints while Chad cleaned up. Then bath time, story time, tucking Lily into bed with her rabbit and 3 kisses each. Later, Chad and Michelle sat on their back porch with glasses of wine, watching the stars come out. The Portland night was cool but not cold. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing guitar. The city felt alive but peaceful. "I've been thinking about that first night we met," Michelle said. "How scared I was to give you my number. How impossible it all seemed. And now?" Chad asked. "Now it seems like the most natural thing in the world," Michelle replied. "Like we were always heading toward this. This house, this life, Lily sleeping upstairs." Chad pulled her closer on the porch swing. "You destroyed my life," you know. In the best possible way. You destroyed everything I thought I needed and showed me what I actually needed. And what was that? This, Chad said simply. You. Us. A life that means something beyond money and power. A life where I can be human instead of untouchable. Michelle rested her head on his shoulder. You taught me something too. You taught me that playing it safe is not the same as living. That love is worth the risk. That transformation is possible if you want it badly enough. They sat there as the evening deepened into night. Two people who had found each other against all odds. Chad thought about the journey that brought them here. From that casino in Las Vegas to this porch in Portland. From the untouchable to just Chad. From empire to home. He thought about his father, wondering what the old man would think of his son now. Not running a criminal organization but designing community centers. Not fed but loved. Not alone but surrounded by family. Chad hoped his father would understand. Hoped he would see that this was not weakness but the truest kind of strength. Strength through vulnerability. Power through love. Success measured not in money or control but in moments like this. Sitting with his wife on their porch. Their daughter sleeping safely upstairs. A life built on honesty and trust and the courage to be seen completely. Michelle had once told him that real power was allowing yourself to be vulnerable with someone who would never use it against you. She had been right. Letting her see all of him, the good and the bad, the past and the hopeful future, that was the bravest thing he had ever done. And it had given him everything that truly mattered. The man who could not be touched had learned to crave her touch. The man who could not stand her stare had learned that being seen was better than being fed. The man who thought he needed an empire had discovered that all he really needed was this. Love. Family. Home. Purpose. Chad Melvin had spent the first half of his life building walls and the second half tearing them down. And sitting here on this porch with Michelle in his arms, he was grateful for both. Grateful for the destruction and the rebuilding. Grateful for the woman who had seen his soul and loved him anyway. Grateful for every choice that led him here. This was what transformation looked like. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. Not the end of his story, but the best chapter yet. And he could not wait to see what came next. Thank you so much for watching this powerful love story. If it touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in transformative love. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have another incredible romance story dropping tomorrow that you absolutely won't want to miss. Tell us in the comments, do you believe love can truly transform someone? And where are you watching from? Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing you these powerful stories. We'll see you in the next one.